G'day YouTube, welcome back to my channel. My name is Stefan, aka Hippo.
A few weeks ago, I released this VFX short. Over the next few weeks, I'm going to break down each one of these scenes with you in a series of tutorials, showing you the techniques, products, and plugins I used to make a composite that is achievable and convincing. As we saw in part 1 and 2, which are available on my channel right now, compositing is accessible. I cover techniques like motion tracking, keying, and rotoscoping, and plenty of small tricks and alternate methods that can help you achieve something that looks pro in After Effects. You can watch part 1 and 2 via the playlist up here or in the description below, but let's get into part 3. Here we are in After Effects, your happy place. Welcome back, guys. Thanks for watching part 1 and 2 of my series of tutorials covering the different scenes of my VFX short, The Spheres. If you guys haven't already, make sure you hit the subscribe button and the little notification bell so that you'll get notified when each new part of this tutorial series comes up. And guess what's next after part 3, part 4. And if you've seen what scene 4, part 4 looks like, you're gonna wanna subscribe and hit that bell so you get notified. This is part 3 though. Still super exciting, but part 4, it's probably going to be the longest tutorial I've ever made, I reckon. But anyway, part 3, here we are. Things are getting a bit more spicy. Now, before we get started, make sure you download the project file, which is in the description below. It has all of these files in there for you, so you can follow along as we go along. Obviously, if you don't have some of the plugins, there'll be a few things missing, but for the most part, it's really helpful to have the project open in front of you and follow along the tutorial with me. In that project file as well, you'll see scene 1, scene 2, and scene 3. So you can go back and look at the previous scenes that I did as well. So what are we going to do here today? We're going to take a look at the scene, see what it requires, and see maybe some of the issues that we might run into. We're going to track this shot in Boris FX Mocha, which is included with every copy of After Effects. We're then going to import that tracking data into After Effects, attach our sphere to that tracking data or your object, whatever spacecraft you have in your scene. We're going to talk about a little bit of color grading, color correction, optical flares again, and I'm going to try to convince you again to go and grab optical flares off of Videocopilot. Then we're going to talk about something a little bit different. We're going to talk about adding these clouds in, make sure they look supernatural, not supernatural, supernatural. And then we're just going to talk about adding some finishing touches to that shot. So let's take a look at the shot. We have here my ragtag group of family members. My dad with his cool little driving hat. My middle bro on the left there with his wife. And my big bro on the right with his wife. And my mom taking some snaps. Now here we are. We're in, where were we? We were in Madagascar. A small island north of Madagascar called Nosy Bay. We went to Nosy Bay. We were being nosy. And here we are on our way to the peak of Mount Passot, I think it was called. Mount Passot. Beautiful mountain. So these spheres have decided to follow my family. Like, oh my God, look, there's this giant sphere in the sky. What's it doing? What's it doing in Madagascar? What sets this scene apart from the other ones? Well, as I said before, the first 2 scenes were very basic in terms of their movement and their motion. Now, if we watch this, this is quite heavy handheld movement. There's quite a lot of jumping. There's quite a lot of jerkiness. So we'll have to do a pretty solid motion track in Mocha to get this right. And you might never be 100% happy with your track. Like, I'm not 100% happy with it here, but I'm happy enough with it. I'm happy it helps sell the shot because it has that handheld movement. And because we've added some lighting and some noise and stuff, which I'll get to later on, we've managed to sell the shot pretty well without having a 100% perfect track. So a heavy handheld shot is going to make your tracking a little bit more difficult. So that's one of the things we have to look out for here. One of the other things is with that handheld movement comes motion blur. So we'll talk a little bit about motion blur as well. One more thing we might have to watch out for is my mum's head there. That might come through the shot and ruin the tracking information, but I'll show you how to avoid that in Mocha. And the other thing to just be aware of as well is that this is a fisheye shot. This was shot on an 8mm fisheye lens. So you're seeing some heavy distortion around the edges. Now what that means is some of that distortion around the edges might be amplified. So you might see clouds and things move slightly around the edges, whereas they're not supposed to. They're being moved because of the distortion. So that might actually hurt you sometimes. If you, for example, if you had to composite that sphere near the edge of your shot, it might be a much more difficult task. That movement, the extra movement that you get from the edge of a fisheye lens might ruin your movement overall. One more thing as well here, we can see there's a quite nice solid midday sun in the top left corner here. So we're going to use that to our advantage to help blend this in with some optical flares. All right, let's get straight into it. So make yourself a new composition by dragging your sphere shot 003 onto the little comp button down here. I've already made a comp, so I will drop it into here. By dropping that shot onto that comp button, it will make a composition that is the exact same dimensions, frame rate as your shot. Here we have our shot. I'll zoom things out a little bit here. Looking pretty good. And the first thing we're going to do is motion track our shot. So a couple of different ways you can motion track with varying levels of success, I have found. With something heavily handheld like this, 8mm fisheye shot, quite jerky, quite bumpy, I would say this is not the ideal After Effects 3D tracker shot. Also, I wouldn't say it's the ideal After Effects point tracker shot. So if you look at this shot, click on it, go to animation, you see here we have track camera, which is After Effects' 3D camera tracker. Then you have Boris FX Mocha, which is what we're going to use. And then you have track motion, which is After Effects' point tracker. You can also track rotation by using 2 points. I find in cases like this, just using a point tracker is not really going to work as well as it can. And track camera might not give you the exact result that you need. I always find it easier. It gives me better, quicker results in Boris FX Mocha. Obviously, depends on your scene. 3D tracking would work great for a shot like this. This is just a test shot that I was playing around with. It's a good example of what you can do using the built-in After Effects 3D tracker to get a scene laid out in 3D space and then place your 3D item within that space. So yeah, we're going to track this shot in Boris FX Mocha, and I will quickly show you how to avoid having something come into your shot and ruin the track. So for example, I'll show you how to ensure that my mum's head here won't come through and ruin what we're going to track in the background. Let me show you. So click on your shot, come up to animation and down to track in Boris FX Mocha. Every copy of After Effects has this built in. There is a pro version available of Boris FX Mocha that takes it to the next level with stuff like mesh tracking and object removal. But everything you need in terms of basic rotoscoping and motion tracking or planar tracking is available in this version. So click on that. That'll place this plugin here in your effect controls for that shot. And then you just simply click on the Mocha logo and it'll open up the program for you. So let's take a look here. I'm going to start tracking midway here. So let's start tracking about here. And I want my spacecraft to be here in the middle covering this cloud. So I'll take the X-spline layer tool and I'll just draw a nice solid shape around the geometry of those clouds. So Mocha is a planar tracker. It tracks planes or areas based on contrast. It's great, for example, if we wanted to track this little sign and change what's on the sign, it's great for that sort of stuff. TVs, mobile phones, billboards, but it's also just a great 2-dimensional tracker or 2.5 dimensional tracker. It's a sneaky little semi 3D tracker. But yeah, based on planes rather than points, like your point tracker in After Effects or the 3D camera tracker in After Effects. So once I create that spline, it creates a little keyframe here down on the timeline, which means as I track and go through, I can stop the track and then move my shape and then continue tracking. So that's one way to avoid my mum's head. So I'm going to rename my layer and call this my main track. And then I'm going to come down here to track motion options. translation, scale, rotation, skew, perspective. If you don't see that, make sure you come up here to your layout and choose essentials. So what do we have here today? We have a shot that is heavy handheld. It's moving up and down, left and right. It's rotating slightly as we move along, and it's moving forward. So we need translation, which is X and Y. We need scale, which is your Z depth. And then we need rotation, which is that side to side movement. That's all we need. We don't need skew. We don't need perspective. Those are super handy for stuff like the sign or mobile phones or TVs or billboards, etc. So that's what we have. I'm going to track backwards from that point. And let's watch. My mum's head skims the bottom there. And I think it is actually affecting that track. So let's just let it track that way. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. And then just to avoid my mum's head there, this is the first method of doing it. You can come here and you can just move this up. It'll still keep tracking the geometry, and we'll do a new track forward, and we'll keep tracking until it gets to my mum's head again. And then I'll just move it up slightly again. And I'll track forward again. From about there, we'll move that up, and we'll track forward again. And right at the end there, let's go here and move that up. Track backwards a little bit. Okay, stop there, track forwards. Boom. So we've avoided my mum's head by creating various keyframes for the spline to move the area that it's tracking away from anything that might interfere. So I'll let that finish off tracking there. So yeah, you're not actually changing the data of the track. You're not changing the data of the track, and it won't change what your track looks like if you do it well, if you do it carefully. It'll just help you avoid things that might ruin your track. If my mum's head went any further into that track, it might mess it up. Mocha is really good at tracking, even if there's items in the frame, or even if you're tracking slightly out of sight of your frame. But there will be times when it messes up. So just so you know, that is one way to avoid that entirely. Now, if you don't want to do that, I'll show you another method. So I'm just going to hide that track there, and I'm going to track my mum. So I'm just going to draw a basic shape around her. Just use position, rotation, scale, mum. And I'm going to track that backwards, and let's just make sure that it sticks mostly to her. Yep, that's good. You don't need to track all the way to the front, but I'll do that now anyway. And then from that point, I'm going to track forward as well. Cool. So basically all we need is this little area where she might interfere with the track. So I'm going to go from here, and I'm going to click on mum's layer there, go to layer properties, and I'm going to make this the endpoint. Set layer endpoint to current frame. So that means this layer's information will start at that point. Then I'm going to go through, you see it's cut it off down the bottom there. And then I'm going to go through, once she's passed that cloud information, I'm going to set that as the out point. So set layer out point to current frame there. Okay, so now I'm going to turn off its tracking features, and now it'll just float freely there as a little shape. How do I now track my cloud and tell Mocha to ignore whatever is inside that shape? Well, let's just rename that my mat. And what you want to do is place whatever you want to exclude from your track above your tracking data. So let's go here and let's make a little bit of a more generous shape here. That's the information that we want to track. Okay, cool. I want it to just be translation, scale, and rotation, and we'll go to that master track. We want mum mat to be above the layer that we're tracking, and we want to ensure that my mum mat does not have the little tracking cogwheel or processing cogwheel ticked. That means it's done tracking, it's not going to track again. So now when we track this, that mat will avoid the movement that is inside this shape. So let's track backwards and see what happens. Pretty nifty. You can tell that it's doing a pretty good job at ignoring my mum's head there. Obviously we ended the layer about here, but it looks like it's done a really good job for just this main section where most of her head takes over to just completely ignore that. So how do we actually tell that it's ignoring it? Well, we can come here to our master track and go view and go to your mats and view your mats. So there you see the shape or what it's tracked there is ignoring whatever is in that secondary track, secondary matte above the tracking layer. Just to recap quickly, you draw an X-spline around the item that you want to exclude. Then you track your new item with this matted item above it and with the processing cogwheel switched off. If you want to learn a little bit more about that as well, check out the tutorial I've linked in the description below, the one where I talk about replacing a screen on a mobile phone. Perfect example, mobile phone, hand comes in front of the mobile phone, and I teach you how to exclude that hand completely from what you're tracking in the background. Really handy, and another feature of Mocha that is super cool. I'm happy with the original tracking data, however, so I'm happy with this one here that we animated out of the way. So let's click on our layer there, go view and stabilize. And when I do view stabilize, I basically just want to watch this and make sure that that central shape isn't moving in a crazy fashion. It looks like it's pretty well locked in. You will be able to tell the difference between a well locked in tracked shot and a not so well locked in tracked shot. There's our main track. Now we make sure you press save, and then you want to close Mocha. So make sure you press save before you close. Close Mocha. That information is now saved within your Mocha plugin over here. So as before, we now go layer, new null object, and we'll call that null our main track null. What a null object does is it acts as a hub. Apply your tracking data to that null, and then you attach other items to that null without affecting the original tracking data that's on the null itself. So click on your sphere shot again here, open up the Mocha plugin, come down to tracking data, create tracking data, and we're going to choose the main track. That was the original one we did. Okay, that's going to bring that data in. We're going to choose an export option of transform, which is what we are dealing with here. We're not dealing with corner pins. You can see more about that in the replacing phone screen tutorial I was talking about just before. Transform, and we want to export that information to our main track null, and we can apply the export. So now if you click on your null and press U, you can see here all these beautiful, beautiful keyframes looking real good. So it has given us position keyframes, scale keyframes, and rotation keyframes. And now if we scroll through that, we can see our little null object is tracked real nicely to that spot where we want our sphere to be. So now it's time to bring our sphere to life and place it in this little scene. So let's have a look back at our scene. Where did we actually place it? So just off to the left of that main cloud, let's pop it in there somewhere. Okay, so let's bring in our sphere. If you look at the project file that I gave you in the little folder, there'll be a sphere3.mov, which is a ready to go alpha shot. You can just drag it in, drop it on there. And what that is actually a already animated shot. It's got all the lighting and 3D awesomeness attached to it, made in Element 3D. And we're going to now bring that in and attach it to the null object. Remember how I said part 4 tutorial is going to be cool? It's going to be cool because I'm going to talk a little bit about how I make stuff like that in Element 3D and actually show you how I did it. But we're here in part 3. Make sure you subscribe so that you know when part 4 drops. So that's when stuff's going to get real interesting. Okay, so this is obviously no good. We want our sphere to be where it belongs. We want to put it in its place. So let's just scale this guy down a little bit and bring it up over here off to the left of the cloud. Let's just pop back here for reference. So a little bit smaller. Looks pretty good. A little bit smaller as well. There we go. Okay, so that's a good position. I'm happy with that. I'm going to now attach that to my main track null. So how do you do that? You come down here to your little pick whip and drag that down onto your main track null. Boom, attached. Alternatively, you can drop down this little menu, the parent and link menu, and choose the main track null from there. Okay, with that done, I'm going to go ahead and turn on the little motion blur switch on that layer, just straight up, and that should automatically turn on your master motion blur switch as well. That'll just add that incidental blurriness to your object in a pretty natural fashion. All you have to do is make sure, come over to composition settings, advanced, and make sure your shutter angle is set to 180, which is just your standard shutter speed, shutter angle. If you want to increase the amount of motion blur, you can actually increase that number and you will get more motion blur. But it might not suit your scene because that's not what your camera shot at initially. But you can fake it if you want to get more. So let's have a look. It's stuck in its spot and it's looking pretty good. Am I 100% happy? No, I'm not 100% happy. I can see a few little bumps and bits that I think could be better, which I would probably attribute to the fisheye lens in this case. But overall, you know, if you just sit back, watch that scene, once we get some color grading, some flares, and some other bits in there, I'm gonna be totally stoked with how that motion track has turned out. Okay, motion tracking, done. Importing tracking data into After Effects, done. Attaching our object to the tracking data, done. So what's next? If you've watched part 1 and 2 of the tutorial series, you'll know that I probably want to blend this in a little bit now. Firstly, with some color grading, color correction. Secondly, with some flares, optical flares. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here to my effects and presets and type in lumetri color. If you haven't heard me talk about this before, this is the best way to color grade or color correct in After Effects and Premiere Pro. I use this every single day on every project that I shoot. So let's bring that down and drag that onto our sphere that we have there. I'm going to zoom in here. So what is wrong with this sphere? It's a bit too sharp. It's a bit too contrasty. We need to dull this a bit. We need to dull it out a bit and make it blend in a little bit better. So what I'm going to do, click on my sphere, come over here to lumetri color, open up basic correction, and I'm going to start with just brightening a little bit. So let's go maybe 0.1. It's not heaps, but let's go 0.2. Okay, so that's added just a little bump of brightness there. Then I'm gonna just play with my shadows here. This is the good shit. I'll make that like 50. That's looking pretty good. So before, after, looking good. Whites, let's bump this up to 50. Okay, that's sharpening your white highlights a little bit. Let's go 80. That's bringing the whites up a little bit. It's looking pretty good. Maybe I'll bring that back down to like a 40. No, that sure looks better around 50. Okay. And then I'm just gonna, you know, this is, if you crush the black here, you'll see that you start just losing that black information there. That's making the black more prominent there. I want to go opposite direction. I'm going to raise the blacks a little bit so that you, again, just lose that contrast, make it look dull, make it look like it's a bit further away, make it look like it's a bit in a bit of a fog away further in the distance. So I'm probably going to go up to like let's try 100, 150. That's looking pretty good. So just those couple of tweaks there have already just melded that item back there into the back of the shot. So that's looking pretty swifty there. That's looking pretty swifty there. I'm happy with how that's blended in. Now, if you want to go even further, you could also, if you look at the pixel difference here, you could say that that is maybe a little bit too sharp. So you could add a bit of a Gaussian blur on top of that if you want to. I'm not going to do that because I'm happy with it, but Gaussian blur over there, pop that on 1 or 2 or 3. That will do the trick if your item is a little bit too sharp. Now, we're actually lucky here. The sphere doesn't cross my mum's head. If it did, we would need to do a little bit of rotoscoping, a little bit of masking to let my mum's head pass this side in front of the sphere. Next up is optical flares. So in part 1, I showed you the free method using the lens flare plugin built into After Effects. Feel free to play with that one if you want to. I'm again going to talk about optical flares here today. If you don't have the plugin, I highly, highly, highly recommend. This is now the 3rd time that I'll be recommending it. Grab it. If you're into visual effects, compositing, if you're into making your motion graphics pop, if you're into making anything pop using the magic of optical flares, then you 100% need to grab it. It is definitely worth the money. It has just recently been updated for After Effects 2022, so go ahead and grab it. So how do we use optical flares? We can come up here to layer, new solid, it'll create a solid, make sure it's comp size, and we're going to call that optical flares. Oh my gosh. Here we have our black layer, right click that bad boy, effect, Videocopilot and Optical Flares. And what you want to do is come over here to your mode, blending mode or transfer mode, and switch that over to screen. If you can't see that option, make sure you've clicked the little expand or collapse the transfer controls pane, that one there. So there's our flare. We know that our sun is up here in the corner. So I'm just going to go straight ahead and drag our flare up here out of the shot in the corner. And you can see here that even though your flare is out of the shot, it still shines onto your shot. So I come up here and I then click on options to open up the plugin itself. Really cool plugin. Lots of great options, lots of great ways to customize your flares, you know, piece by piece. This is a legit awesome plugin. I like coming to preset browser, going to light and choosing digital sun. And then if I'm using optical flares to do what I'm going to do today, which is just add some overall light, I'm actually going to hide most of the items here. I don't want the little bits and bobs. I just want that glow. So there's my glow. Okay, open that up. See how that's just painted my whole scene in this awesome natural feeling light. Off, after, and look at what it does. It just paints over both items, right? So it's helping blend those two items together in unison. Is it maybe a bit too bright? Yes, we can bring that down to 80, 75, 50. So very subtle, but to me, that just paints a nice little even light over both items. And we don't have to worry about tracking it. It's just living up there in the corner where the sun belongs. Now you can track it, but I've talked about that already in part 1 and 2. So go ahead and check out those parts if you want to have maybe some flares coming out of there or some little glints moving along with the handheld motion. Alrighty, what are we going to talk about now? The clouds. So if there's one thing that stands out as my favorite part of this shot, it is the clouds. Now the hard thing about clouds is if you're going to import some clouds, like get an image off of Google or Pexels or Unsplash or download a cloud element, the hardest part is blending it to make it look exactly like the clouds that are already in your scene based on the lighting situation that you have. So I've got a bit of a workaround. What I'm actually going to do is duplicate my main shot. So duplicate your main shot here and call the first one cloud left. Go ahead and delete Mocha plugin off of that. I'm going to bring that over the top of the sphere, but still underneath optical flares. And I'm going to go in here and I'm just going to mask around this main cloud area here. Like so. I'm then going to press F to feather that mask the tiniest amount. And then I'm going to go and key away the blue that is in that shot. So key light, drag that onto your cloud. I'm just going to pick this blue right here. And it's done a pretty damn good job already. You can see there's a bit of stuff around the edges. So what I'll do is I'll just change that to screen matte. And I'll just crush this a little bit so it make the black a little bit more black and make the white a little bit more white. And that'll give you a very clear, change it back to final result, a very clear cloud there. You can see it's just ruined the color of the cloud a little bit there. So replace method, swap that over to hard color. That should be good to go. Okay, pretty happy with that. Move that anchor point into the middle. So I pressed Y on the keyboard, or come up here and press the pan behind tool and just drag that anchor point up there. Scale that down, pop it over the front of the sphere just there, and just drag this mask in if you're not happy with some of the random stuff that's going on there. And I'll just get rid of this edge of the cloud here too. We don't need that. And before you press play, you're happy with that positioning, right click your little cloud, time, and freeze frame. So that's just going to freeze frame in that exact position and turn that video layer essentially into just a image layer. Now go ahead and attach that either to your main sphere or your main track null. That would be doing the same thing because your main sphere is already attached to your main track null, but I'll attach it to the main track null here. And now if you play that back, you'll see that that cloud is looking exactly like all the other clouds in terms of lighting, color, and overall look. And it's sitting real nicely in front of my sphere, making it seem like that sphere is perched back there behind some clouds. Really helps meld the shot together and sell the shot even more than without the cloud. So in my main shot, I've got 2 clouds, so I'm just going to quickly add another cloud there. So I'll just move that one across there a little bit. I'm just going to duplicate that, and I'm just going to scale that down a little bit more and just pop it in front like that. Obviously, you don't want these to look exactly the same, so I'm just going to change the mask slightly there to make it look a little bit different. And there you have it. So 2 clouds there. Both are attached to my main null. And if I play that back, that's looking pretty good sitting back there. Now, just some finishing touches, guys. I'm going to just slap a little bit of noise over all of these items just to blend them in together. So layer, new adjustment layer, rename that to noise. And I'm just going to pop over here to my effects and presets, choose just the built-in noise effect, drop that in there, uncheck use color noise, and let's just start at 5. That's a bit too noisy. Bring it down to maybe a 2, maybe a 3. Let's go with 2, and then zoom out. And what that's doing is it's just adding noise across the whole scene and basically making those 2 items have similarities. So just like we did with Flare, which is paint light over both of these items, the backplate and the 3D sphere, the noise is adding an effect to both layers to just help them blend together and make them seem like they belong together. In some cases, a shot might already have noise, and then you add a 3D sphere on it and it doesn't have noise, then you want to add noise to just the 3D sphere. In this case, both shots don't have much noise, so I'm adding some nice noise over the top of both. I'm going to go 2.5. And, you know, in some cases, it's quite aesthetically pleasing. It looks cool. It almost acts like a bit of a grain. So let's take a look back at this shot. I am pretty damn happy with how this has turned out. One last thing, make sure your clouds also have their motion blur checked on. And that's it, guys. We have taken a relatively heavily handheld shot. We've tracked it through a couple of difficulties in Boris FX Mocha. We've imported that data, added our sphere, color graded it, added some optical flares, and quickly added some clouds in there to blend in the shot even better. So that's it for scene 3. I really hope you're enjoying the tutorial series so far. Part 1, Part 2, and Part 3 all available now. With each tutorial's release, I will update the project files and make sure you have access to each one of those scenes as we go along. We have some great scenes coming up, guys. Next part, we're going to cover Part 4. Scene 4 is probably going to be the most in-depth tutorial of the series. I'm really looking forward to that one, and I'm sure you guys are as well. We'll be covering things like Element 3D, stock footage libraries, a bunch of cool stuff. And it will be a bit of a different tutorial than all of the ones that we've done so far. The only episode 4, Part 4, is releasing sometime next week. Like I said, I've had a blast so far. I hope you have as well. And I'm really looking forward to what I can do on this channel with you guys in 2022.
Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed that tutorial. If you like what you see, leave a comment below. Let me know what you thought. Let me know what you want to see or what you want to learn. I'm going to make sure you've hit that subscribe button so you'll get notified when I drop each one of these new tutorials. Thanks, guys.